Hey, what's going on YouTube? Son of Sanguinius here, and today we are going to be continuing our Blood Angels Tactics videos by going at the ever-ubiquitous and ever-common Tactical Squad. Yes, we've made it through all the HQs, and now we're finally diving into the troops today, all two of them. So, the Tactical Squad. Some Blood Angels players seem to sort of stray away from the Tactical Squads. They seem to sort of like the Scouts, because, let's be honest, you know, the Tactical Squad has never sort of been the coolest thing about Space Marines. You know, usually it's, about either the Stern Guard veterans, or the Terminators, or some of the other, elite things, and I can definitely see that, especially being a Blood Angels player. You know, we got Death Company, we got Sanguinary Guard, we even got our own, Assault Terminator, so that's pretty cool, but for me personally, I really like the Tactical Squads, and I'll go over a few reasons why, and boy oh boy, we do have quite a bit to talk about. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but usually I do these fairly unscripted, although I do have a list of bullet points, and frankly, with all the previous videos that I've done, none of them are as long as the one that I've done for the Tactical Squad, because frankly, with such an adaptable and common unit, there's quite a bit of things you can actually do with the Tactical Squad, believe it or not. So without further ado, we'll just jump right into the stat breakdown here. So a Tactical Squad, they come in at 70 points. They are Weapon Skill 4, Ballistic Skill 4, Strength 4, Toughness 4, 1 Wound, Initiative 4 with 1 Attack, Leadership 8, and a 3-up Armor Save. Pretty much everything is same for the Sergeant and the Veteran Sergeant, with the exception that the Veteran Sergeant has 1 more attack and 1 more leadership, so 2 attacks and leadership 9 for the Veteran Sergeant there. Their war gear is, of course, the Power Armor, Bolt Gun, Bolt Pistol, Frag and Crack Grenades. For special rules, they have And They Shall Know No Fear, Combat Squads, and Furious Charge. For options, they may include an additional 5 Space Marines for 14 points per model. If the squad numbers less than 10, then 1 Marine can take something from the Special Weapons list or the Heavy Weapons list. If the squad has 10 models, then 1 Marine can take something from the Special Weapons list, and another Marine can take something from the Heavy Weapons list. You can upgrade the Space Marine Sergeant to a Veteran Sergeant for 10 points. The Space Marine Sergeant or Veteran Sergeant may take items from the melee or range weapon lists. The Space Marine Sergeant or Veteran Sergeant can take Melted Bombs for 5 points. The Space Marine Sergeant or Veteran Sergeant may take a Teleport Homer for 10 points. We'll touch on that a little bit later. And the unit may select a Drop Pod, Rhino, or Razorback as a dedicated transport. Whew. So, with Tactical Squad, I sort of see them as the backbone of your army, especially when you consider that while we like to have sort of all of our elites and things, those kind of things are not really designed to sort of take objectives, and while they are fun to use, you really need something that's not only plentiful enough as far as number of models, but something that can be relatively cheap and relatively effective for what they do. And for me, a Tactical Squad is just that, and I think the beauty of them is that while they are sort of the basic, unit, they can literally be tailored to your liking in almost every way I could see. I mean, you have your choice of special and or heavy weapons. You can kit out the Veteran Sergeant or Sergeant however you want. You can even, go different routes as far as the transport goes. So, Tactical Squad gives you a lot of options. So before we go on, do we want to be ranged? Do we want to be close? Just something to sort of note here. When you think about the basic bolt gun, right? It's rapid fire, 24-inch, strength 4, AP 5, right? Bolt guns are best used at 12 inches or less, and I say that because you want to make the most out of the rapid fire weapon type that it has. So, for any of you that don't know, which would probably be one of you out there in the internet, with rapid fire, if you're firing at an enemy unit that is within half or less range, then you essentially double your shots. So at 12 inches or less, a bolt gun would fire 2 shots instead of just 1. So considering that, and this doesn't just go for Blood Angels, this goes for basically all Space Marine armies, you really do want to get up close with your bolt gun. And so that's why the idea of sort of like a ranged sort of tactical squad, while still viable, it just sort of loses some of its potential there, because you're not making the most out of the weapons that your models are equipped with. But if you do decide to go for like a ranged thing, so let's assume, greater than 12 inches, just for the sake of the argument. You can go with something like a plasma gun and/or heavy bolter, or maybe even like a missile launcher. With plasma gun, you have nice both anti-infantry and anti-armor capability. Heavy bolter, obviously, that's geared more toward anti-infantry, or the missile launcher. Missile launcher can be kind of flexible, although I would consider it more to be anti-armor than anything else. So if you're going to be, running something like that is those are some of the best special and/or heavy weapons that you might want to consider. For close combat, personally, I like running a meltagun and a heavy flamer. For two reasons. The first reason is you have a nice diverse mix of both anti-infantry with the heavy flamer, and remember, Blood Angels tactical squads are, I believe, the only tactical squad of any of the Space Marine variants that can actually take a heavy flamer, so keep that in mind. Plus, the heavy flamers are cool. Strength 5, AP 4, template, ignores cover, all that good stuff. Heavy flamers are cool. So you have some nice anti-infantry capability with the heavy flamer, but you also have some nice, a little bit of anti-armor with the melta-gun. And if you're within 6, you obviously have the melta special rule. And considering, you're playing Blood Angels, you would probably want to be playing aggressive anyway. This on top of the fact that, like I said before, you want to be within 12 inches to get the most out of your bolt gun. So, of course, a melta gun and a heavy flamer, you're going to be right up there in front of your enemy and just unloading onto them. But the second reason why I like going with the melta gun and the heavy flamer is because they are both assault-type weapons, which means that, hey, let's say you come out of coming off a drop pod or something like that, and you come out of a rhino. Turn 1, obviously you're not going to be able to assault, or I should say the turn you disembark, rather. You're not going to be able to assault because you've just disembarked from a vehicle, and it has to be an assault vehicle. You could use a Land Raider for tactical squads, and while that's fluffy, that may not be the most optimal, but we can touch on that at a later date. So anyway, say, you disembark out of your vehicle, whatever. The turn that you disembark, you're not going to be able to charge, but hey, at least you can get some good fire. The next turn, or let's just assume that you ran up there, you can actually make use out of both of your special weapons, your special and your heavy weapons, without sacrificing your ability to charge. And I think that's really good, especially when you consider, again, the heavy flamer, good anti-infantry, and the melta gun, primarily anti-armor, but you could fire it into, a squad of Terminators or a squad of Chosen, or anything that's armor 3 or 2-up armor save or something like that. And you can still do some damage, and then you fire your bolt pistols, assuming you wanted to charge with the tactical squad, and then you can get your charge off. And so that's just the two main reasons why I like going with the melta gun and heavy flamer combination. Good mix of abilities, and they're both assault, so you can fire the key weapons in your squad and still not lose your ability to charge. So for me personally, I like to go, I guess one would call it mechanized, although I don't really see it that way. I like to run my tactical squads in rhinos or drop pods if they're in an offensive role. What I mean by that is, if you're going to be moving these guys up the table and if they're going to be keeping up with the rest of your army, in my experience, foot-slogging Marines up the table tends not to end very well. While power armor and Space Marines, they're resilient and everything, especially compared to some other troop choices out there. There's going to come a point where the squad is going to be reduced so much by the mid game that they're just not going to be that effective anymore. Instead, truth of the matter is, shooting is currently favored in this edition. Maybe things will change in 8th. I didn't think I'd mention 8th edition in this video, but I'll make another video regarding that. But anyway, suffice it to say, if you're going to be running these guys up the table, you probably want a transport of some kind. And if you really want them to be exactly where they need to be at the drop of a hat, then perhaps a drop pod would be the most fitting for you. Now, if you're going to be playing them more defensively, so if you're just going to take your tactical squads and just sort of hang them back on objectives, I don't really think it's at that point necessary to give them a transport, although it would certainly help if they had something to protect them from shots incoming, because rhinos are basically like a 55-point shield basically from oncoming fire until they get blown up, of course, which is kind of a shame. I'm sure the machine spirits of rhinos appreciate being used as shields essentially to protect the Marines inside. But suffice it to say, you can foot slug Marines if it's a defensive role. I don't really like the idea. Again, I don't really like the idea of just running Marines up the table. I think that while the squads themselves are durable and they can take some fire, your enemy is probably not going to waste any time taking care of any units that are possibly objective secured, depending on what kind of detachment you use. Although if you're going with something like a ball strike force or whatever, we don't have objective secured. So moreover, your opponent's just not going to waste any time taking apart your tactical squads if you run them up the table and you use them aggressively. If you're playing them defensively, though, you can foot slug them and you can just sit them in some ruins or something like that, and sort of hang back and get those objectives. So, touching more so on the offensive thing, though, I mentioned before that I like to run, melt-a-gun and heavy flamer if I'm using them aggressively. Typically what I do is I run my tactical squads in a rhino and I just sort of drive them up the table, disembark, you got your nice anti-infantry, nice anti-armor, that sort of stuff. But if you're going to be doing like a drop pod assault sort of a thing, the 10-man flamer, heavy flamer combo is something to be feared, because that's a lot of templates coming at you, especially if you got more than one tactical squad doing it. Not to mention that you can also kit out your sergeant to have 2 hand flamers, or you could vice versa do sort of like an anti-armor build with your tactical squad as well, if you instead opt for something like melt-a-gun, multi-melta, and then 2 inferno pistols on your sergeant. You can definitely do some neat things there if you want to go for something like the anti-armor builds. But speaking of the sergeant can be kind of tricky to sort of kit out, because a lot of people, and I'm raising my hand here, a lot of people sort of overspend when kitting out their sergeant, and frankly I can understand why. Your sergeant is meant to be sort of the leader of the squad. He's supposed to you're supposed to give him some extra flashy bits, paint him up a little bit nicer, and maybe he's got a power weapon, maybe he's a veteran sergeant, he's got a gold helmet, and he's got the black shoulder pads, and he's got all the flashy Blood Angel wings and blood drops, and he looks great, and that's fine. I get it from that end, but it can be easy to overspend, especially if you're running more than 2 tactical squads. All those extra points start to add up, and they can really hamper your list, especially in lower point games where every point you spend matters. In higher point games, you can sort of afford to have those sort of more expensive units and stuff as the points goes, because frankly, and if you're playing 1,000 points, losing a tactical squad is much more devastating than if you were playing 2,000 or 3,000 points, because frankly, the individual value of each unit is significantly higher at a lower points game than it is a higher points one. But anyway, so the question becomes, okay, well, what do I kit out my sergeant with? Well, if you're going for something just like a generic range build, you could just, leave the sergeant as is and just not give him anything. That's certainly an option, certainly an economical option. It's also kind of a boring option. I could see myself giving him maybe a combi weapon just for a little bit of extra flair or fluff, maybe combi plasma, something like that. Or maybe even a combi Melta if I wanted something a little bit more anti-armor. And keep in mind, we're playing Blood Angels, and on top of that, we want to make the most out of our bolt guns and get within 12 inches, get that rapid fire off. Ideally, not all the time, but ideally. So what about something like, anti-armor? Well, again, I mentioned the combi weapon before, but maybe you're looking at something more like an Inferno pistol or plasma pistol, something that's, more than just a one-shot, thing, with a little bit more punch to it. Shorter range, yes, but again, if you're playing Blood Angels and, you want to make the most use out of your tactical squad, you're probably going to be within 12 anyway. Additionally, you can also, if you want to go for close combat, you can give them a power weapon and Melta bombs. Some of these kind of lap over. Obviously, if you wanted to give him an Inferno pistol and a power weapon, you can have something that's, has some nice anti-armor, but, does have some, nice close combat capabilities, the Melta bombs too with an Inferno pistol and maybe something like, a power fist. That would make your sergeant particularly geared toward anti-armor, whereas if you wanted to go something more anti-infantry, maybe a hand flamer, but I tend not to really bother with the hand flamers too much unless I was using flamers en masse. Although, as I said before, if you wanted to use your tactical squads in something like a drop pod list or whatever, you could go with the dual hand flamer on the sergeant, flamer and heavy flamer in the tactical squad to get 4 flamer templates. Obviously, the hand flamer isn't that good, but you're basically just burying your opponent in sheer volume of dice there. Just one last thing, couple last things to mention here. Teleport armor can come in handy. It's sort of one of the last things that's in their options things, and depending on the list that you're running, especially with the Archangel's Orbital Intervention Force that we see in Angel's Blade, teleport armor can certainly come in handy. Having your Terminators not scatter when they deep strike in is always nice, and obviously you need to position your tactical squad in such a way that to where your Terminators can make the most use of it, and that can kind of be tricky because usually the places where you want your Terminators is not off in the corner somewhere, guarding an objective, but frankly right in the heart of your enemy's models, and so playing your tactical squads that way, it's aggressive, it's fun, it's fluffy, but it can be just a little bit dangerous there. So anyway, this one's definitely been a long one. We're running almost 18 minutes now. So just sort of summarizing my final thoughts here. The tactical squad, definitely a reliable and adaptable core choice. Some people may not like it because they want to save, enough of their points that they can, spend on, elites and everything. But personally, I do like the tactical squad. I like that it's, a resilient and adaptable core choice. Definitely something to consider when you are building your army. And frankly, your troops choices are more likely than not going to be the backbone of your army anyway. So, anyway, feel free to leave your thoughts down below. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.